Hey, how's it going, YouTube? Welcome to another reading of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. So, last time we left off, we have that incredible back and forth between Villefort and Edmund, uh, basically explaining what his charges were, and why he is being arrested. And Villefort comes to the realization that the letter was supposed to be going to his father, who I believe was arrested, or yes, he was put to the guillotine for supporting Napoleon Bonaparte. Uh Very interesting though, because now you're seeing a lot of plot points from like the past couple chapters now kind of like intertwining a bit. You see Villefort was a random encounter character that was introduced in chapter 5, I believe. Yes, he's, introduced in chapter 5, and, now you see how his fate is kinda, like, intertwined with some of the villains of the story or the antagonists, now making him from a protagonist character into a, almost threshold guardian or, shadow figure. Because you see his lingering intentions. You know that he wants to protect his family's name, and basically move on from the shadow of the corruption that he believes his father left. Uh, Very interesting to see, though. So we now have Edmund as a very strong hero character. He's very all around. He has a good sense of justice as well. He has a sense of love. He has a sense of duty to his father. And now you have all these other characters. A lot of the antagonists so far have been very straightforward. You know, they're very intentional in their ways. The Procureur de Rue is a shapeshifter in some ways, though. He sees himself in Edmund quite a lot. He even mentions in the previous chapter that him and Edmund are almost exactly the same. You know, they were both at a wedding. They were both snatched out of the wedding to uh, come to the examination and handle that. Uh, they couldn't be completely more different though. Like one comes from nobility, the other is a very poor boy that like kind of like worked his way up the ranks. So it's so interesting to see the dynamic between the two, and I hope that there's more to the Procure de Rue than with the movie, because the movie, I feel like they didn't really touch on it too much. Maybe they, like, glanced over it, like, in, like, a minute or 2, but he's only a character at the very beginning and the very end. So, he's not necessarily mentioned as much as I think, maybe? I don't know. It's sorta odd. But let's get into tonight's reading. Hopefully this one's not too long. I think it's only, like 5 pages, something like that, 6 pages. We'll see. All right. Chapter 7, The Chateau d'If. D'If? Or is it The Chateau If? As he passed through the antechamber of commissary, a police made a sign of two gendarmes. The gendarmes? Who instantly placed themselves on either side of Dante's. A door communicating with the law courts was opened. They passed down one of the long, dark passages, which made all those who entered them give an involuntary shudder. In the same way as Villafort's chambers communicated with the law courts communicated with the prison, that somber edifice overlooking the clock tower of the Acoles. Acoles? Acoles? They wound their way along the passage, and at last they came to a door. The commissary knocked on it thrice with an iron knocker, and it seemed to Dante as if each blow had been aimed at his heart. Doom, doom, doom. The door was opened. The gendarmes gave their hesitating prisoner a push forward. Dantes crossed the formidable threshold, and the door closed behind him with a loud bang, and now breathed a different air, a thick and mephitic air. He was in prison. His cell was clean enough, though it was barred and bolted, and its appearance did not fill him with any dread. Why should it? The words of the deputy, who seemed to show so much interest in him, rang in his ears like a sweet promise of hope. It was 4 o'clock when Dantes was taken to his cell, and as it was the 1st of March, the prisoner soon found himself in utter darkness. With loss of sight, his hearing became more acute. At the least sound, he rose quickly and advanced towards the door in the firm conviction that they had come to set him free. But the noise died away in another direction, and Dante sank back onto his stool. At last, about 10 o'clock, when Dantes was beginning to lose all hope, he heard steps approaching his door. A key was turned, and the bolts creaked. The massive oak door swung open. Dazzling light from two torches flooded the cell. By the light of these torches, Dante saw the glittering swords and carbines of four gendarmes. "Have you come to fetch me?" Dantes asked. "Yes," was the answer of one of the men. "By order of the deputy." "I should say so." "Very well," said Dantes. "I am ready to follow you." In the belief that they came at the deputy's orders, Dantes, relieved of all apprehension, calmly stepped forward and placed himself in their midst. A police van was waiting at the door. The coachman was on the box, and the police officer was seated beside him. The door of the carriage was opened, and Dantes was pushed in. He had neither the power nor the intention to resist, and found himself in an instant seated between two gendarmes, the other two taking their places opposite, and the heavy van lumbered away. The prisoner glanced at the window. They were grated. He had but changed his prison. Only this one moved, and was conveying him, he knew not whither. Though the grating, the bars of which were so close that there was barely a hand's breadth between them, Dantes recognized the Rue Casseret, and saw that they were passing along the Rue Saint Laurent, and that they and the Rue Taramis towards the quay. Soon he saw the lights of the Conseil before him. The van stopped. The officer got down from the box and opened the locked door with his key, whereupon Dantes stepped out and was immediately surrounded by four gendarmes, who led him along a path lined with soldiers to a boat which a house officer held by a chain near the quarry. The soldiers looked at Dantes with vacant curiosity. He was given a place in the stern of the boat, and was again surrounded by the four gendarmes. Whilst the officer stationed himself at the bows, the boat was shoved off. Four oarsmen plied their oars vigorously, and soon Dantes found himself in what they call the Frior, that is, outside the harbor. His first feeling on finding himself once more in the open air was one of joy, for did it not mean freedom? But the whole proceeding was incomprehensible to him. Whither are you taking me?" he asked. "You will know soon enough, but we are forbidden to give you any explanation." Dantes knew from experience that it was useless to question a subordinate who had been forbidden to answer any questions, and he remained silent. As he sat there, the most fantastic thoughts passed through his mind. It was not possible to undertake a long voyage in such a small boat, so perhaps they were going to take him a short distance from the coast and tell him he was free. They had not attempted to handcuff him, which he considered a good augury. Besides, had not the deputy, who had been so kind to him, told him that, provided he did not mention the fatal name of Noirtier, he had nothing to fear. Had not the de Villefort destroyed the dangerous letter in his presence, the letter which was the only evidence they had against him. He waited in silence and deep in thought, with that far-away look in his eye peculiar to sailors. He tried to pierce the depth of the night, leaving Retenue Island with its lighthouse on their right, and keeping close to the coast, they arrived opposite the Catalan Creek. It was here that Mercedes lived, and now and then he imagined he saw indistinct and vague forms of a woman outlined in dark shore. Why did presentiment? Why did presentiment not warn her that the man she loved was but 100 yards away from her? If he gave a shout, she could hear him. A false shame restrained him, however. What would these men say if he called out like a madman? In spite of the repugnance he felt at putting fresh questions to the gendarmes, he turned to the one nearest him and said, "Comrade, I adjure you on your honor as a soldier to have pity on me and answer. I am Captain Dantes, an honest and loyal Frenchman. Though accused of treason, whither are you taking me? Tell me, and on my honor as a sailor, I will submit to my fate." The gendarme scratched his ear and looked at his comrade. The latter made a motion with his head which seemed to say, "I can't see any harm in telling him now." And the gendarmes, turning to Dantes, replied, "You are a native of Marseilles and a sailor, and yet you ask us where we are heading for." "Yes, for on my honor I do not know." "Have you no idea?" "None at all." "Impossible." "I swear it by all that I hold most sacred. Tell me, I entrust you." "Unless you are blind to have never been outside the port of Marseilles, you must know. Look around you." Dantes got up and quite naturally looked in the direction the boat was moving. Before him, at a distance of 100 fathoms, rose the black, steep rock on which stood the frowning Chateau d'If. This strange pile, this prison whose very name spelt terror, this fortress around which the Marseillais had woven its legend for the past 300 years, rising up so suddenly before Dante's, had the effect on him that the sight of a scaffold must have on the condemned man. "My God," he cried, "the Chateau d'If! Why are we going there?" The gendarme smiled. "You cannot be taking me there to imprison me," Dantes went on. "The Chateau d'If is a state prison, and is only used for important political offenders. I have committed no crime. Are there no judges or magistrates at the Chateau d'If?" "As far as I know, there are a governor, some gaolers, a garrison, and some good thick walls." "Are you trying to make out that I am to be imprisoned there? What about Monsieur Villafort's promise?" "I don't know anything about Monsieur Villafort's promise. All I know is that there we are going to the Chateau d'If." Quickly as lightning, Dante sprang to his feet and tried to hurl himself into the sea, but four stout arms caught him before even his feet left the bottom boards of the boat. With a howl of rage, he fell back. The next moment, a sudden impact shook the boat from stern to stern, and Dantes realized that they had arrived. The guardians forced him to land and dragged him to the steps and led to the gate of the fortress. The police officers following him with fixed bayonet, Dantes made no useless resistance. His slow movements were caused by inertia rather than opposition. He was dazed and reeled like a drunken man. He saw more soldiers stationed along the slope. He felt the steps which forced him to raise his feet. He perceived that he passed under a door and that his door closed behind him. But all his actions were mechanical, and he saw as though a mist. He could distinguish nothing. He did not even see the ocean. That cause of heartbreaking despair to the prisoners who look on that wide expanse of water with an awful conviction that they are powerless to cross it. There was a moment's halt, during which he tried to collect his thoughts. He looked around him. He was in a square courtyard, enclosed by four high walls, and slow and measured tread of the sentinels was heard. With and each time they passed before the light which shone from within the chateau, he saw the gleam of their musket barrels. They waited here about 10 minutes, evidently for orders at least. At last a voice called out, "Where is the prisoner?" "Here," one of the gendarmes replied. "Let him follow me. I will take him to his cell." "Go," said the gendarme, giving Gantes a push. The prisoner followed his guide, who led him into a subterranean room whose bare and reeking walls seemed as though impregnated with tears. A sort of lamp standing on a stool, the wick swimming in fetrid oil, illumined the shining walls of this terrible abode, and revealed to Dantes the features of his guide, an undergaoler, ill clad and of a low type. "Here is your cell for tonight," he said. "It is late and the governor is in bed. Tomorrow, when he has read the instructions regarding you, he may change your cell. In the meantime, here's some bread. There's some water in the pitcher over there, and some straw in the corner yonder. That is all a prisoner requires. Good night." Before Dantes could think of an answer, before he had noticed where the Gaulier had placed the bread and the pitcher of the water, or looked at the corner where lay the straw for his bed, the fellow had taken the lamp and locked the door behind him, leaving his prisoner to the darkness and silence of the Goal. When the first rays of sun had brought some light into the den, the Gaulier returned with the information that Dantes was not to change his cell. An iron hand seemed to have nailed him to the spot where he stood the night before. He was motionless, with his eyes fixed on the ground. Thus he had stood the whole night long without sleep. The Gaulier advanced. Dantes did not appear to see him. He tapped him on the shoulder. Dante shuddered and shook his head. "Have you not slept?" asked the Gaulier. "I do not know," was Dante's reply. The Gaulier stared at him in astonishment. "Are you not hungry?" "I don't know," Dante still made answer. "Do you want anything?" "I want to see the governor." The Gaulier shrugged his shoulders and went out. Dantes gazed after him, stretched out his hand towards the half-open door, but the door was closed upon him. Then his whole frame was shaken with one mighty sob. The tears which choked him streamed down his cheeks. He beat his forehead against the ground. He remained a long time in prayer, and while reviewing his past life, asked himself what crime he had committed at his tender age to merit such a cruel punishment. The day passed thus. He scarcely touched his bread or water. At times he would sit absorbed in thought. At other times he would walk round and round his cell like a wild animal in a cage. The next morning the Gaulier again made his appearance. Well, he said, are you more reasonable today than you were yesterday? Dante's reply made no reply. Come now, don't lose heart. Is there anything I can do for you? I want to speak to the governor. I have already told you that is impossible. The Gaulier answered impatiently. Why is it impossible? Because the rules of the prison do not allow it. Then, what is allowed here? Better food if you pay for it, a walk in the courtyard, and sometimes books. I don't want any books, neither do I want to walk in the courtyard, and I find my food good enough. I only desire one thing, and that is to see the governor. If you keep on bothering me with that every time I come, I shall not bring you any more food. Well, then, said Dantes, I shall die of starvation. That's all about it. Now, look here, said the Gaulier. Don't go on brooding over the impossible in this way, or you will go mad before the end of a fortnight. Do you think so? Was the reply. I am sure of it. Madness always begins like that. We have an instance of it here. There was an abbe in this cell before you came. It was though his unceasingly offering 1,000,000 francs to the governor if he would set him free that his brain was turned. Listen, I am not an abbe, neither am I mad, though I may be before long. Unfortunately, I am at present in full possession of my senses. Now, I too have a proposal to make. I can't offer you 1,000,000 francs for a simple reason that I have not so much to give you, but I offer you 100 crowns if the next time you go to Mercedes, you will go to the Catalans and give a letter to a girl named Mercedes. Not even a letter, just a couple of lines. If I were to take that letter and were found out, I should lose my place, which is worth 1,000 francs a year in addition to my food. So you see, I should be a fool to risk 1,000 francs for 300. Very well, said Dantes, but remember this. If you refuse to take my letter to Mercedes, or at least to tell her that I am here, I shall one day hide behind the door, and as you enter, break your head with this stool. Threats? The Gaulier called out, retreating a step and placing himself on the defensive. Are you certainly going mad? The abbe commenced like that. In 3 days you will be raving mad. Luckily, we have dungeons at the Chateau d'If. Dantes picked up the stool and swung it around his head. That's enough, the Gaulier exclaimed. Since you insist on it, I will go and tell the governor. That's something I like, said Dantes, putting the stool down and sitting on it with bent head and haggard eyes as though he were really losing his senses. The Gaulier went out and returned a few minutes later with 4 soldiers and a corporal. The governor's orders are that the prisoner shall be taken to the dungeon. We must put madmen with madmen. The 4 soldiers seized Dantes, who fell into a kind of coma, and followed them without resistance. He descended 15 steps. The door of a dungeon was open, and he entered, mumbling, "He is right. They must put madmen with madmen." And that concludes chapter 7. Wow. I did not expect them to get to the prison so quickly. Holy moly. So, chapter 8, Villefort and Mercedes is going to be our next chapter. Wow, that was actually kind of interesting. That whole build up to revealing the prison is so nice. He doesn't realize where he's going, and in that moment where, you know, again, like the writing style for this, you can almost hear like the orchestra playing in the background as you're reading, very dramatic music. I picture like very somber violin occurring, especially when he sees when he thinks about Mercedes off the shore. Maybe romantic music, and then slowly it starts to maybe start to wane out, and then you have that sudden realization of the prison that he's about to go to, the Chateau d'If, and maybe the music starts to change a little bit abruptly. You have maybe more flows of the waves and crashes of the ocean. uh I don't know, I vision this like when I'm reading that kind of stuff a little bit, but it's so interesting the way that they write this quite a bit. I liked it a lot. And that was just such a short little chapter too. But we are now in the Chateau d'If. uh and Edmund is now going to spend, I think, somewhere around 15 years, I think, in prison, if I'm not mistaken. I don't exactly remember too well. But wow, the next chapter is going to be revolving around some of the extended characters, Villefort and Mercedes. So I wonder where that is going to lead. But if you are watching from YouTube, I do hope that you are enjoying all these readings so far. If you do enjoy it, make sure you like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. There's going to be some boxes at the end of the video that are going to be popping up on either side right here at the bottom for the Tales of Horror and Grimm's Fairy Tales. Go check those out. There's some really good readings in there as well. So I will see you all on the next YouTube video. Later. Bye.